Welcome back to Rand on Real Estate. I'm Greg Rand, your host. You're listening to 77 WABC. The website is randonrealestate.com. We have a blog there. We have the clips of the show there. And we want you to ask your questions. We'll have you on the air. The whole purpose of this is to teach you the things that you're dying to learn about real estate from people who really know it. And right now we're going to talk about people who really don't know it. We usually save a little time in our show every week to put a spotlight on some smart person saying some really dumb things about real estate. Because I tell you, there's one thing that never ceases to amaze me, and that is how many people have zero expertise, zero experience, except for the fact that maybe they live in a house and they shop for clothes in a store. They have zero experience in real estate whatsoever, and yet if somebody asks them about their opinion about the housing market or about the mortgage crisis, man, they've got opinions and they speak with such authority. You know, if somebody calls this show, if anybody ever calls this show and asks me for a stock quote, I'm going to have to hang up on them. Maybe I'll probably won't hang up, and I'll be nice about it, but I don't answer that question. If somebody calls me and says, what do you think about gold? I say, well, it's shiny and my wife likes it. That's what I know about gold. Okay. I would never make a recommendation about something I didn't know. We had a guy in here last week who's a currency trader spouting off about real estate, about how you shouldn't invest in American real estate. Oh no, you should invest in Mexican or Canadian real estate. I don't know much about Mexico or Canada, okay, but I know that people are trying to get out of Mexico and trying to come here, and I see them as tenants. So I don't know what he's talking about, but real estate in other countries is nothing like the asset class of real estate in America. But I digress. I want to jump into Senator Chris Dodd. Senator Chris Dodd is going to shortly be former Senator Chris Dodd, which is just going to be a great day in America, certainly a great day in the real estate business. I want to play something that he said just this week, and we'll see after we're done if you think he's telling the truth. Hit it.
You get some early warnings of what's occurring. One of the painful discoveries was in January of 2007, when I became chairman of the banking committee, is discovered that we're employees of the Federal Reserve who had identified the mortgage problem months earlier, but no one said anything. And so it didn't get the kind of attention it deserved early on. That's very important. So much of what occurred were in the unregulated area of our economy, the shadow economy. Brokers that weren't regulated, mortgage lenders that weren't regulated, that lured people into deals. It was the source of all of this difficulty. That ends in this legislation, too.
Okay, so let's dissect this just a little bit, all right? First, he said that back when he became the chairman of the banking committee, I guess he was born that day because it was January of 2007, and nobody had said a word about any problems in Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And if you're not really familiar with what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac do, because they get thrown around a lot these days, but maybe you're not really familiar with what their role in the real estate and mortgage market is. They have all the money, okay? So when you go to a bank, most banks, or you go to a mortgage company or a mortgage broker, chances are that you're actually borrowing Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac money. Because once that loan gets made and gets closed, that gets securitized, and then it gets bought usually by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So what this gentleman's talking about is how nobody could have foreseen and nobody realized and nobody had said anything about how bad the situation was at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. But what he really turned the spotlight on was the evildoers, the mortgage bankers and the mortgage brokers who were out there luring people in to give them predatory loans. Now, I want to explain how the real world works in the mortgage business. If you're out in the field and you're trying to find customers to get mortgages, okay, you're a salesperson or you're a marketing firm trying to sell mortgages. That's your function in the world. That's how you make your living. There are guidelines that are placed up around these mortgages that are placed there by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that say, here's how much money you have to put down to qualify. Here's how good your credit has to be in order to qualify. And here's how much money you have to be able to make to qualify for that loan. What was happening during the real estate boom of the last decade is that because you had, on the one hand, Wall Street greed pouring billions and billions and billions of dollars into the housing market via investing in mortgage-backed securities and buying derivatives and trading on this paper that Fannie Mae was buying most of, you had an incentive for them to give more money out because the more money they gave out, the more trading they could do. But on the other side, you had the government who was instructing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to make more loans because it was a social engineering play. They wanted to get more people into homes. They wanted to elevate home ownership. Well, that is a noble intent, okay? But the way they did it was they said, not enough people qualify, make them qualify, lower those standards, And for example, we're out there in the field. I own a mortgage company. We've got salespeople out in the field. And one day we get on a conference call and they say, okay, instead of 10% down, we want 5% down. We say, okay. So we start selling loans and you qualify at 5% down. The next day it's 3%. A month later they say, you know what? Forget about down payments. We don't need them. No money down loans. We say, okay. So we go out there and we found people that wanted to buy houses, and the ones that didn't want to put money down couldn't have gotten a loan a year earlier, but now they can get one. Okay. It was never the function of the frontline sales and marketing operation to be the keeper of the judgment of who qualifies and who doesn't. Where we were given parameters, and the underwriters, the people who design the mortgage programs, they're the ones who put those things in place. And I guess what I'm hearing these days is that what we should have been doing is acting as mortgage broker and babysitter. You know, when a home buyer is saying, I want to buy this house, and we say, great news, you qualify, what we should have said is, you know what, I don't think you qualify. And by the way, you can't go to McDonald's tomorrow because that's not good for you either. And give me the pack of cigarettes. I'm going to throw them in the garbage because, you know, I am now, you know, we're part of the nanny state now. So mortgage brokers, it's our responsibility to tell you that you can't afford that loan. And, well, you know what? I want to jump to clip number 2 because Chris Dodd basically just told us that he couldn't see it coming, didn't see it coming, hadn't heard anything about it, and it was really nothing to do with the government. It was all the private sector that caused this. Let's play clip number 2 from back in 2007.
There is a sort of a panic going on today, and that's not what ought to be. The facts don't warrant that reaction, in my view. First of all, these institutions are fundamentally, speaking of the GSEs, are fundamentally sound and strong.
Okay, so this is back when he became the chairman of the banking committee. What did he say? He said the GSEs, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, are fundamentally sound and strong, and there's a panic going on. Doesn't quite jibe with what he said this week, where he said that, you know, nobody told him until early 2007. So in early 2007, sounds like he found out about it, but he was still denying it. And I want to go back a little bit further because it gets even worse. Let's play the clip from 2000 floor on the House of the Congress.
It is indeed a very troubling report, but it is a report of extraordinary importance, not only to those who wish to own a home, but as to the taxpayers of this country who would pay the cost of the cleanup of an enterprise failure. The analysis makes clear that more resources must be brought to bear to ensure the highest standards of conduct are not only required, but more importantly, they are actually met.
There's been nothing that was indicated that's wrong, you know, with Fannie Mae. Freddie Mac has...
In addition to our important oversight role in this committee, I hope that we will move swiftly to create a new regulatory structure for Fannie Mae, for Freddie Mac, and the Federal Home Loan Banks.
Through nearly a dozen hearings where, frankly, we were trying to fix something that wasn't broke. Mr. Chairman, we do not have a crisis at Freddie Mac, and in particular at Fannie Mae.
And we passed...
Oh, that one died there in the middle. Well, what you're hearing here is a tennis match going back and forth between one politician saying, here comes a report from the regulators who are telling us that there are serious problems in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Then you have another politician saying, no, there's not. You guys are trumping it up. Then you have another person saying the report says it in black and white. We have to deal with this issue. Then we have other politicians saying, you're crazy. There's no crisis. There's no problem. You're making the whole thing up. What's my point? The point is that today we are debating and probably passing in Congress another round of financial reform. Okay? A round of financial reform that is once again saying that all the evils of the economic downturn are to be rested on the shoulders of the private sector. So we have to regulate the private sector. But guess who's being exempted again by all these financial reforms? Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. These two organizations are bankrupt, and they're bankrupt because they're being run by politicians, and there is no accountability, and there's no way for us to be able to make sure that they don't repeat the mistakes of the past. When you have people like Chris Dodd in the Senate, who are willing to say one thing and mean another, and are willing to boldface lie years later to make sure that nobody ever tries to fix the problem that he helped to create. I'm just happy it's a good day that we're seeing him retire, and I think we're going to see a lot of people like him retire this year as well.